Revolution now. Today we are going to be doing classical music. Okay, so classical music, I think is safe to say, one of the hardest genres to wrap your freaking head around. It is a fucking massive, impossible. I mean, there's just so much history to classical music, so many different composers from all around the world, different eras of classical music, okay, tons and tons and tons of compositions performed by different orchestras with different interpretations. It's just such a big thing, and it's also, frankly, for a lot of people kind of boring because there's no vocals and no lyrics and it's just freaking violins going ding dong. Well, let me tell you something. I'm gonna help you get your toes, just dip your toes in classical music, okay? So you can at least kind of help wrap your head around it. And if you do want to, explore classical music and listen to some classical music yourself, hopefully this video will help you kind of get started, okay? So, I think it should be fun. I kind of honestly started this video I was inspired because Anthony Fantano posted a comment on Reddit saying he knows literally nothing about classical music. I don't blame him, but also, if you're the world's biggest music critic, you should probably fucking know a little bit about classical music. So I'm gonna show all you fuckers that I do know a little bit about classical music. I really do, okay? I performed, I've performed in school choirs singing tons of different composers. So I know some stuff. All right, enough about it. Let's go ahead and get started. We're gonna get started. I'm gonna give you some important composers and just tell you a little bit about the context. It's gonna blow your mind. It's gonna be awesome. Let's get started. So the first composer we're going to be talking about is going to be Johann Sebastian Bach. Okay, Bach, you've heard the name Bach, okay? He's a genius, one of the smartest humans to ever exist. Really complex music, okay? Really introduced the world to how complex music can be He's from the Baroque era, okay? There's a lot of different eras of classical music. It gets a little confusing, so for context, before the Baroque era, there was the ancient era, which is, I'm not talking about that. There was the medieval era, which was from 500 AD to 400 AD, which was, this is before the printing press. It was usually the church kind of commissioning a composer to write some music for the church or something, This was before the printing press means they had to write all the music out. It was really time-consuming, expensive. Usually the music was pretty simplistic, like Gregorian chants or like some dude on a lute singing about dragons. It's freaking medieval music, okay? After that was the Renaissance era, which was from 1400 AD to 1600 AD, which is, the printing press came along. The Renaissance came along. Music was getting a little bit more accessible to more people. Started to touch on more topics, get a little bit more humanistic, get a little bit more personal, a little bit more interesting, okay? And then the Baroque era followed that, which was from 1600 to 750 AD, and this is where you find Johann Sebastian Bach. Okay, Bach was not the first Baroque musician or Baroque composer, but he was definitely the most influential, biggest impact, the most well-known, okay? So, what makes the Baroque era so important is that this is when composers started composing their music in specific keys for their songs, okay? Like, they would, I'm gonna compose a song in G major, or B minor, or D minor, whatever, okay? And to keep it simple without getting into technical, whatever that means to write a song in a key, it basically just makes writing songs a little bit easier. It allows you to get a little bit more complex with your compositions. It also allows a lot more improvisation. So in the Baroque era, you see more improvisation come along. And also, being able to write compositions in different keys allows you to kind of just, flesh out the individual parts of each instrument a little bit more, and boom, now you got orchestra. So Baroque music is when you see orchestras come along, okay? Pretty awesome. And the most badass motherfucker to come out of the Baroque era is Johann Sebastian Bach, because Bach wrote so many compositions that were so fucking complex, okay? You can analyze the hell out of every single one of Bach's compositions because they're all like really complex puzzle pieces fitting together very nicely. Just insane genius, okay? Bach showed the world how complex music can be. He showed the world there's no fucking limit, okay? He was introducing a little bit more dissonance in his music, introducing a little bit more counterpoint in his music, and basically his songs, you know, like, I've sung some of his songs before, they're like impossibly hard, but so beautiful and just chills inducing, so dissonant, just like, see, like, every single vocal part just comes, like, okay, I recommend if you're gonna listen to one Bach piece, I would check out Mass in B minor, because it's a vocal piece, and you can really hear the complexities of each vocal. You know, the sopranos come in, the tenors come in, the bass comes in, like, and it's just like you can hear like they're all coming in like not at the same time. It's just like it's just like a sea of complexity and dissonance. It's chills inducing, absolutely beautiful. Check out Bach, okay? Let's move on. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. You've heard of frickin' Mozart? Come on, there's a movie about him. You've even heard of Mozart. You've heard of music from Mozart, even if you don't even recognize it, okay? So Mozart came from the classical period. Yes, it's a little confusing because there's you know how there's the Baroque and there's the medieval. Well, there's also the classical period within the whole umbrella of classical. A little confusing. The classical period being from 1715 to 1820. Mozart. Well, let's talk about classical, okay? The classical era, okay? Classical era. So Baroque, which came before it, was really dense and really complex, which I really like. Well, classical music following it actually got a little bit more simple. It's got simpler, less dense, a little bit more delicate, usually driven by a single melody that you can sing along to, you know what I mean? So if there's a classical piece that's like, da, 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 okay, that's Mozart, that's a classical piece, you know, there's a melody you can sing along to, okay? Unlike Baroque, which is just like, okay? So classical era, simpler, Mozart, okay. So Mozart really wasn't like a, you know, revolutionary. He didn't, you know, really wasn't like super innovative. He didn't like come up with some crazy concept that changed classical music forever. No, he was just a master at composing within this classical era. Really prolific, very versatile, all sorts of compositions, just brilliant, okay? Just songs that are just gonna stick with you forever, that still to this day you hear it and immediately you recognize, like, oh, okay, I've heard that tune a million freaking times. So yeah, just you know, a brilliant composer. If I had to recommend one Mozart piece to listen to, I would definitely recommend the Requiem. Okay, this is the Requiem he was writing on his deathbed. He actually died before it was finished. He had some contemporary of his finish it after he died. It's actually really interesting because the Requiem, lots of people are going to tell you this is like the best work of music of all time, one of the best works of art of all time. Just super heavy, very, you know, like this, you can just tell Mozart is fucking dying while writing a Requiem, and it's like the singing is just so, like it's just like teardrops like pouring down your face with every note. It's very heavy, very beautiful, and like I said, he died before it was finished, which adds more drama and fun to it. And you can kind of tell, like, when the songs are really good, it's probably because Mozart wrote it. And when the songs are really bad and awkward, it's probably because whoever finished it was working on writing it. So, kind of interesting little tidbit that makes it also a little bit more interesting to listen to. And even though, like I said, the classical era was certainly a little bit simpler, easier to listen to than the Baroque era, Mozart was still a genius. There's still lots of complexities going on there, okay? It's so don't fucking write off the classical era. Mozart is a fucking legend for a reason. Go listen to any Mozart, you're gonna be like, oh, I've heard this before, okay? Because it's Mozart. His songs are freaking classics, literally, okay? Ludwig van Beethoven. Okay, Beethoven, you've heard the name. You know, I'm sure you've heard these names before, but I'm hoping I can give you a little bit of context to what the hell we're talking about here. So Beethoven, so while Mozart, like I said, was the classical era, just a master at the classical era, wasn't super, you know, innovative or anything. Beethoven, on the other hand, was super innovative, just always trying different song structures out, breaking all the rules and doing all this crazy stuff, okay? And he gets a lot of credit for being the transition between the classical era to the Romantic Era. The Romantic Era being from 1800 to 1900, okay? And in the Romantic Era, you can probably guess from the name, we're getting a little bit more emotional here, a little bit more dramatic, you know, just pouring your feelings out, getting real personal with the music, okay? Just super dramatic, okay? And you can hear that in Beethoven's music. Beethoven's Third Symphony often gets a lot of credit for being the very first romantic composition, and you can tell those fucking drums come in just so intense. Just right off the bat, like immediately you can tell you're about to listen to some real intense shit. Okay, Beethoven also wrote a lot of, you know, classical era compositions, but the romantic shit is where it gets real interesting in my opinion. And then of course there's the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven, which is required listening. Okay, this is a choral symphony, another innovation by Beethoven that, well, it's just like so emotional, so beautiful, so impactful. And then, of course, you're gonna recognize some of this. You're gonna recognize the just dramatic and emotional. You know what I mean? Like that's what romantic is all about. It's just, and you listen through the whole Ninth Symphony, it's just going between all these emotions from depressed and anxious and it's crazy, okay? It's awesome, it's fun. Beethoven is a real revolutionary, had a huge impact, bringing on the Romantic Era. Also just a brilliant, also he was going deaf by the end of his life, so you know what I mean? Like the Ninth Symphony, he was freaking going deaf when he wrote that freaking masterpiece that so many people are considered one of the best symphonies of all around the freaking world, okay? Brilliant guy. Let's move on. Following the Romantic Era, we get into the 20th century, and this is where classical music just kind of just like, it just does all sorts of crazy stuff, okay? There's minimalism, impressionism, neoclassical expressionism, there's avant-garde, modern, just all sorts of classical music, all sorts of crazy, John Cage doing all sorts of crazy stuff, you know what I mean? So it's really fun to dig into, but I'm just gonna give you one composer from the 20th century that I think is really important to know, definitely one of the most important composers of this 20th century, and that is Igor Stravinsky, okay? Igor Stravinsky, he's a real revolutionary. From Russia, okay? Really well known for his ballet, The Rite of Spring. This is from like 1910s, early 20th century, okay? So, The Rite of Spring, honestly, if you don't like Beethoven, if you don't like Mozart, if you find Bach boring, if you find all that shit boring, Igor Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring might actually kind of kick ass for you. It's really entertaining. I think it's actually pretty accessible for people who are into, you know, if you're into like krautrock or progressive rock or noise rock, experimental rock, honestly. Because what's basically going on here is Igor Stravinsky, this composition, The Rite of Spring, very dissonant, very atonal, very rhythmic, okay? So just think of like a dissonant like chord just like repeating over like like it's really jarring and crazy, and it's kind of aggressive and kind of like it's kind of, you know, it's just like it's avant-garde, okay? It's like, let me put it this way. When this ballet was first performed, there was a freaking riot. Everyone in the audience was freaking out. You couldn't even hear the music on stage. Everyone was like, what the fuck is this? This is naughty. You cannot be playing these dissonant chords. This is insane, okay? So it started a riot, changed the world, kind of showed the whole world, look, there's no rules. We can do whatever we want. We're in the 20th century now. We can freaking play crazy dissonant chords and crazy strange rhythms, and you know what I mean? Like, pretty awesome. Like I said, if you don't like any classical music whatsoever, check out The Rite of Spring. Very easy to listen to, quick listen, very fun, very awesome, okay? So yeah, I mean, that's Igor Stravinsky, freaking revolutionary, okay? So that's all I have, okay? I mean, I feel shitty about this video because, I feel like I barely touched on anything. First off, I was only focusing on European classical music, okay, which is, you know, usually what people think about when they think of classical music, but there's plenty of awesome classical music from all around the world, first off. Second off, I skipped over freaking Haydn and Vivaldi and Chopin and just a bunch of other freaking amazing composers. I feel like this is such an injustice, okay? And third off, there's just so much history of, like, you know, the history of Mozart's life is so fascinating. Beethoven's life is so fascinating. I mean, like there's just so much politics and history, and just it's a monolith of so much information and so interesting. Okay, I hope I gave you some good information about each of these composers from the different eras. So if you like Bach, you can explore more Baroque music. If you like Mozart, you can explore more classical music. If you like Beethoven, you can explore more romantic. And if you like Stravinsky, you can explore more 20th century classical music and onwards, okay? That was my goal, even though I skipped over so much information. Also, learn the piano. It's gonna help you appreciate these composers more, or just learn any instrument. It helps. That's honestly a big part of kind of helping you get into classical music. But I hope I gave you enough information that, you know, if you're at a party and someone's talking about Mozart, you at least know he's from the classical era, and you get your, you know a little bit of something at least. So you're so freaking welcome for that, and shame on you, Anthony Fantano, for being a bigger music critic than me and not even knowing anything about classical. How do you call yourself a music critic if you don't even know the origins of music? And I skipped over ancient music. Whatever. Thanks for watching. Hope this was informational. Punk Revolution now.